Hi. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm Lynn Fuentes, and I want to thank you all for showing up after, most of you, after a really intensive 4 days of conferences. So here's another one. My name's Lynn Fuentes, and I work in the area of chronic illness. I have a program called the Cohen of Illness. I'm not going to really spend time introducing myself, but if you want to find out more, our website is transformationteaching.com. So you can go there, and there's a whole section on the Cohen of Illness. It's got interviews and links and a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm just going to start right in this morning. I have a lot I want to cover, and I also want to have a chance for all of us to talk some. So what I want to cover today is three things. One is how the interval map can shed light on chronic illness in both an individual and in the collective. And the second thing is I want to talk about how much illness is in our shadow, that people with illness are segregated, discriminated against, and many times often badly treated instead of being a welcome part of humanity. And then the third thing I want to do is look at some new ways we might look at chronic illness and at people who have chronic illness. So I'm defining chronic illness as something that lasts 6 months or more, has no apparently available cure, and affects multiple areas of life: self-image, relationships, work, finances, everything. It has physical and emotional and mental effects. So right now we're dealing with a lot of acute illness, but chronic illness is always with us, and obviously it's formed, many of the people who die from this coronavirus have underlying conditions. And also we're very likely to see post-viral conditions come out of it. One of the things that research has shown is that many of these viruses and bacterial infections have almost a 10% rate of chronic post-viral syndromes afterwards, many of which can last for years. So we're not only expecting a lot of people to get sick from the coronavirus, but we're also expecting a lot of people to come down with post-viral syndromes as well. And that's not much talked about, but I think we'll probably see it happening. So individually and collectively, when somebody gets sick, we have both a project and a trauma. There's a lot more to do. Anybody who gets ill knows that there's just a ton of work that goes along with being ill. And then there's the trauma. There's just a shock to our lives that everything gets turned upside down. It's a very complex, wicked problem for any of us individually and for us collectively. So I want to talk about how we can use some of the interval map to help us with this. So Jose, can you put up the interval map? Okay, so most of you here are probably pretty familiar with interval. I'm not going to go into these things in detail, so if you don't have at least some background in interval, it may go a little fast, but I didn't want to spend too much time teaching quadrants and things like that. So in the AquaMap, we have 5 major models, and each one of those can be applied to illness. So the quadrants can help us get a hold of the problem. What's going on? Where's it coming from? And we're going to talk just a little bit about that in a minute. The lines help us to know which domain the problem is in. Is this a problem of our interior psychological life? Is this a problem of our physiology? Is it a problem of spirituality? Is it a problem of interpersonal relationships? And all of these pieces will come into play with any illness. Then the stages can help us to understand our own worldview about illness and how that affects the way that we relate around it, and it helps us to understand other people's as well. Types can help us to see the effects of gender, for example, on illness. All research used to be done on men, and only recently did they just realize that perhaps women's bodies were not the same, not reacting the same. So gender has played a part in chronic illness. And then our types, like the Enneagram type, are going to play a difference and have an effect on us. as well, how we experience this. And then states can help us focus in on the changes in our states of consciousness, both our emotional states and our spiritual states. And they highlight also the impermanence of whatever state we are in. And we can get used to watching the constant minute changes that go on in our individual bodies and also in our collective. So states are also helpful. So just to go to the quadrants, for example, and Jose, you can put up the quadrant map. So let's say we have a problem. For example, let's say we're overwhelmed, individually or collectively, totally overwhelmed by an illness. We can get some sense of what's going on with that illness by having a look at the quadrants. So if we take this problem of overwhelm and we go into the upper left quadrant, this is the interior individual, what's going on inside of us. And we can see we might have some attitude, some feeling, some sense of, let's say we get something like lupus, and we could have a sense of embarrassment or concern or worry. All those kinds of things are going on inside of us. Outside of us, in the upper right, this is the world of objective treatment, test results, observations, that kind of thing. So we go to a doctor, find out what's going on, they do tests, they find out certain things, may not correspond with our upper left. Our upper left may say, I feel terrible. The upper right may say, tests don't show anything wrong. So we can see where conflicts can arise, and we can see what areas the issues are arising in. And then we have a we space. And this is the interpersonal nature, intergroup aspect of illness. So overwhelm there can be taken into the family. For example, somebody gets sick, the whole household can get overwhelmed, too much to do, too much to manage, too many upsets going on, emotional situations, children's, parents, all that kind of thing. So that's another whole area of issues. And if they get confused, if you find yourself going to the upper right to get solutions to the lower left, you're not going to be satisfied. You need to be able to put them in their right quadrants and figure out from there where you need to go for assistance. And then the lower right is the systems that you have to deal with. So you get ill, you're all of a sudden swamped with insurance forms, you're dealing with pharmaceutical companies, you're dealing with government policies, you're dealing with hospital systems, all those kinds of things. So it's easy to see how any illness can overwhelm a person because it's going on in all four quadrants. Now, that helps us with the project of illness, taking it apart in the quadrants. Then we have the trauma of illness. And I think you could take the slide down, Jose, thanks. And for the trauma, we might think more about ILP, integral life practice, thinking about the various aspects of integral life practice. And Jose, you could put up the next slide. Like waking up, how is developing my state of consciousness, how is awakening out of this ordinary situation, how is that going to affect illness? It can affect trauma, it can be very helpful. There's a person named Jeff Foster who's written a fair amount on illness and awakening. And then there's growing up. The more grown up we are, the more options we're going to have for managing illness, the more clearly we're going to see it. So growing up is another aspect that can help trauma. Cleaning up, finding our shadows, because with illness, everything gets heightened. And we find ourselves, whatever shadow might have been there in ourselves or in our relationships is going to come to the fore. So not only are we now dealing with illness and all the project, but we also have all of these shadows arising, shadow situations that we're dealing with. So cleaning up is another very valuable thing to do for trauma. And then showing up in the best way that we can. So I thought we might use the chat, or do we have time to do a breakout here? I think we actually.
Yes, we do.
Right? Yeah, we do. Okay, so I think it might be a great idea if we did some breakouts, and you could talk with each other about a couple of two questions. One of them is, what aspect of this integral map could you see using in your own approach to illness, whether you have an illness, you're a caregiver, or you're just concerned about it in general? How can you see some aspect of that map helping you shift or increase or work with some aspect of this problem? And then maybe a second question is, in the larger world, when you're in discussions with people about illness, how could you bring in elements that are not being seen? How can you bring them into the discussion? So for example, if somebody is focused on the upper right quadrant, totally into the conventional medical world, how can you perhaps bring in questions of the upper left and the lower left quadrants and expand the discussion doing that? So if we could put people in groups of 2 or 3. I wonder if anybody wants to bring up anything in the group as a whole, just to share that came out of what you were talking about.
Hi, I was just chatting before we went to the breakout group that in some way I just might be a good example for what's happening, since I do have COVID for the last few weeks, months actually. And for the last 5 days, I felt like it's been talked about me all the time. Like it was always about the thing, and it was never about the people that actually have it. It was always third-person view. And I was waiting for a clue that somebody was going to ask about whether or something. It just didn't happen, so I didn't say anything. But right now, since you are actually doing this group on behalf of exactly the thing, I mean, chronic illness, and I've been more than 3 months, I didn't know what I had, because when I was in hospital, the doctors told me, your symptoms are not right. We send you home. We don't do a test. Upper right. Plus systems, and they sent me home, and I was home for months now, and it didn't feel good at all, like really bad. So I went to a doctor again, and they said, just to make sure that you don't have it, we make an antibody test. And it turned out that I had it. And now the official people say I didn't have it. The doctor says I have it. They don't talk to each other. My company doesn't let me in. My friends don't talk to me. So all these quadrants that you were talking about, they just happened. They just lively happened while I'm still completely bodily, like I was in bed all weekend, still following the conference. So yeah, I'm there, and I feel all that right now.
Yeah, I think you bring up a point that came up in our group as well about the left-hand quadrants. People don't look at those at all. We're all focused on the right-hand quadrant. What are the institutions going to do? What are the treatments? What are the tests? We don't look at how do people feel when they get this, or how do their relatives feel, and what's going on in that way. So yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that, and I hope you find places like this for some kind of understanding, some opportunity to talk about those left-hand quadrants and what's happening.
May I say something?
Yeah, we'll take you and then we'll move on.
Hello, I'm Snežana from Serbia, from Belgrade. I'm professor of psychology, psychotherapy, and I'm practitioner, I'm researcher, and I have 40 and more years of practice. First rule for me is to look to the person in front of me. And long tradition existential psychotherapists, I will not name them, is to take in their hands their health, and to just to do whatever they do, but according to themselves. And my experience privately, and the last one with a client who got a diagnosis pemphigus vulgaris, who was dying, being in a hospital from July till 18 December, and he was just they didn't know what to do. It is a lethal situation. And he was crying, coming to me by the phone because he was isolated. And I said him, the first sentence was, do you know what is the most healthy something in you? He said, I don't know. I asked him, that's your symptom. What the symptom you have? Wounds all over the body, inside, outside.
I'm just going to stop you for a minute, Snezana. There is a tremendous amount of background noise, screeching going on.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. And maybe you could put much of what you want to say in the chat, so we continue to hear from you, because I want to hear what you were going to say.
I don't know. And he said, oh. Yeah,
I'm sorry, the screeching is coming.
He will be quiet, huh?
No, it's not working. I think you're going to have to mute yourself. I'm sorry, but I appreciate what you said about looking at the person, because I think that is really, really key. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so I'm going to move on a little bit and just a couple more words about how to use this AquaMap, all quadrants, all lines, all states.
May I finish what I started just, and then I'll do something with the parrots, okay?
Okay, as long as we can't take the sound in the background. If that shows up again, we're gonna have to mute.
Yes, I will just be very close. And he answered me, all the life I was holding something inside, and what is inside is wounds outside. And we started to work in 1 month, unbelievably. I was every day, every night in contact with him. And after the month, he was out of hospital. And he's going to skiing. He's now working, and he's excellent. So I really, if I choose a doctor to go for something, I will choose somebody who trusts that it is possible to be cured.
Yeah.
First question I ask somebody, do you believe that you can help me or not? Is it curable or not? That's something I will go to finish with parrots, okay?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good point. You want to be with somebody who has a better outlook than, you're just going to manage this or you might die or something like that. So thank you. So using the AquaMap, there are several ways you can use it. You can start with a particular problem, map it onto the model. How does it show up in the states? How does it show up in the stages? What quadrant is it in? Those sorts of things. Or you could take an element of the self, like the body, the mind, the soul, or the spirit, some aspect of yourself, and see what aspect needs attention. Because in the integral map, we take all of those into account, and we can often let one or more of them go. So you can start with who you are now and who you'd like to become, because illness raises the question of who am I many times. And so you can look at that and you can start following that as a train through the models. You can start with one aspect of your life, like maybe your work life, and work with that in the model, and then see how it trickles out into all the other areas. And then you could see what wants to emerge. You can just see what is this illness causing to emerge in me, where, in what directions, in what areas, what might lie out there that I don't know yet in one of the quadrants in the stages. Can I sense some kind of direction? So there are many ways to use the model, and we could spend years going into depth and into any one section of it. But I'm going to move on now, because what I want to talk about is the shadow of illness, which has come up to some degree in the comments already. So 60% of people in the United States, at least, where I've seen the statistics, and I assume that it's worldwide, have a serious condition of some sort, some kind of chronic illness. And yet we look at the world as though 99% of the people are healthy, and there's this unfortunate 1% who has something going on, but that's just not the case. And it's not only people at the end of life who have these problems, it's people, I think it's 60%, 68% of people between 18 and 60 who have a chronic illness. 68% of them are in that age range, and 15% of them are children. So it's all ages are facing problems of chronic illness, but our society treats it as if it's something to be kept out of sight, or it's a drain on society, or it's the fault of the people who have it, or something like that. Or it's not about me, at least not for now, so I'm just going to push it out my mind. Chronic illness is like kind of a sibling of death. Nobody wants to look at it. Nobody wants to deal with it, either in themselves or in anybody else. So we find ourselves, we literally don't see people with illness. We try to avoid them, and we also don't see, because many illnesses, most illnesses are invisible. We can't see heart disease, we can't see autoimmune disease, we can't see pain. So unless people actually share their condition with us, we don't see it. And then the reaction often is people don't believe it. First, they're too busy to ask or get involved. They're unaware of the impact of illness. Oh yes, you have rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, well that's a shame, but they don't see into how many aspects of their life this illness leads, and how much it affects them. And then people will pretend that it's not as bad as you say it is. So somebody's talking about their illness and you say, yeah, they're there, you put it away. Oh, it's going to be better tomorrow. It's not that bad. You're making too much of it. So there's constant tendency to want to push it away, tamp it down. A lot of it comes from compassion, oddly enough, because people want to help. They want to fix somebody, and then they're face to face with something they can't fix. And so they don't know what to do or say. So they either push it away or they go into being a fixer. And I've done enough of that in my life, of trying to fix it for somebody else or tell them how they should fix it. And that can be pretty annoying for the person who's ill. So this urge we have to shut out this whole area of experience is not integral. We're lopping off a huge part of our experience and we're not looking at it. Integral embraces everything. So if we want to have an integral look at illness, we're going to want to look at all of this and actually look it in the face and deal with it. So I think we have time for another breakout group. Hopefully we'll end up with different people and get a chance to meet people. So the questions that I'd like to raise this time is, how do you avoid seeing illness? And even people who are ill avoid seeing it in themselves. They often don't want to consider themselves as disabled or ill or something like that because of many things, the stigma in society, the fact that it's painful, a lot of things, but we can avoid it, and we avoid it certainly in other people. So I'd like to look at, how do you avoid it in your personal life, and then think about, how does our culture shut out illness or turn its back on illness? So I think this time we could take, let's say 8 minutes, Jose, if we could do that. And there are 2 other people in the waiting room just showing up. Okay, they're in. So for those of you who just joined, we're breaking into a group to talk about how do you avoid illness? How do you shut illness out of your life, both in your personal life and in the culture? How do we do that as a culture? So I'm just going to move on. We'll have some more chance for discussion a little later, but I wanted to look into some of the reasons that we do this kind of putting illness into the shadow. And I'm going to look at a couple of them. The first one I want to look at is the stages of development model. So if you could put that one up, Jose. This is one of the most complex aspects of integral theory, so I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it, but the point is that each of the stages of development, and if you're familiar with integral, you will have seen these. This is from the Daily Evolver, their chart, and basically we expand ourselves over the course of our lives. We start out with a limited way of seeing things, and we continue to expand our capacity to see different perspectives and to grow and to develop our emotional selves and our interpersonal selves. And this is a map. It's ladder-like. Some people don't like ladders, but you can also think of it as concentric circles adding onto yourself. So we all go through these stages in our own particular way. So it's going to be a little different for everybody, but most people will be able to pick out in themselves at least some time in their past when they were, I'm going to start with the red, because the early stages are people who haven't yet quite developed a self. But when you get into this red stage, it's an opportunistic power self. And in this case, you're going to see illness as something to fight or something to be ashamed of, because it takes your power away. And the focus of people at this stage of development, you can think of starts at the age of 2 when kids get a self, like no, and it's me and all that. But it goes on up through life, and there are some adults who are still acting out of this stage. So illness is now something to be ashamed of, or it's something to attack. The next stage up, the amber, is treated more like some judgment on you. Your lifestyle isn't right, or it's a gender problem, or you're in the wrong ethnic group, so there's a lot of blame that goes along with illness in this traditional level, and a lot of belief in the particular authority that people might follow. If they say something is true about illness, then it's going to be believed. The orange rational becomes very interested in science, and a lot of the upper right quadrants very much into this rational scientific view of things. So here illness gets to be seen as an impediment. You're wanting to achieve, you're wanting to move ahead, and all of a sudden illness comes along and it stops that. And then from the outside, there's this willingness to put it away, because those people who have an impediment, they don't belong in our success track and all that kind of thing. And then you get to the pluralistic, the postmodern stage. And people here often see illness as self-created, that in a way you're to blame. It's your own mind, your own spirit, your own soul, because this is a stage where you become very, very aware of thoughts and beliefs. And so illness is seen as self-created. And it brings in a whole new dimension of illness that hasn't been seen before, and it has a lot of value. But it can also lead to blaming and shaming other people. You know, if you only dealt with your anger, or you got over your problems with your father, or you had more positive thinking, then you'd be well. And this has a tendency to push people away with illness. Again, I mean, they can say, wait a minute, I'm sick, you know, I've done everything I can. I'm no more neurotic than you are, and yet I have an illness. And so we need to see again that illness arises in all 4 quadrants. It can arise in the upper left as a spiritual malady. It can arise in the upper right as an accident, leaving somebody, or a virus or something like that. It can arise in the lower left as a result of stress in a family situation, for example, or work or whatever. And it can arise in the lower right with a iatrogenic illness and institutional problems. And somebody mentioned earlier, the fear of going to the hospital now because of this virus can leave people sicker than they were. So there are all kinds of attitudes that come into play, and each of these people have their own way of pushing illness away. And so you can encounter any one of these. At the integral level, ideally one sees it as arising in all 4 quadrants, interpenetrating all of life. I mean, all of us are healthy as well as ill. Even a person who has an illness is mostly healthy. Our bodies are so complex, they couldn't function if almost everything wasn't healthy. So there's a mix of health and illness and health. And even the healthiest of us have problems too. So it's not a black and white thing. We can't separate it. It's a wicked problem. It's a problem that affects all of us. It has multiple causes and effects, and it can't easily be put into any one bucket. So then we move into turquoise, where it becomes really, I think, an acceptance of this as an intrinsic part of being, a part of the process of creation and destruction. One is not wholly healthy, one is not wholly ill. Our culture is not wholly healthy, it's not wholly ill. There's a flow. And so when we encounter these various beliefs, we're going to find that each of these groups has a shadow, and we're going to come up against it in ourselves, and we're going to come up against it in other people. So we can take down this slide. And we also find shadow in quadrant reductionism. And we've probably seen a lot of this, where people tend to focus on only one quadrant. And in medicine, it's almost always the upper right quadrant. What do the tests show? What are the treatments? Let's get rational about this. Let's get scientific about this. And leaving out, how do people feel about this? How is it impacting their lives? All of those kinds of things. Where is spirit in all of this? Line reductionism, the same thing. The lines, there's the interpersonal line, the cognitive line, the emotional line. People can get really interested in one and not in the others. And so things get left out there too. And people retreat and they hide behind their favorite line or hide behind their favorite quadrant. And then I think in this world, there tends to be a banishing of spirit. We just throw it out. We don't look at it. We don't allow for the unknown. I mean, a perfect example is we're all sitting in the middle of this pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen to us, to our society, to anything. But we don't want to allow that in. People are forever coming up with answers and reasons. We don't allow the paradoxical to show up. How can somebody be healthy and ill? We don't allow the larger possibilities of human experience. Human experience encompasses all of these things. It encompasses illness as well as health. And so when we take spirit out of life, when we take this expanded view of life, that's another way that we can put illness into the shadows. But to me, instead of separating illness from health, we want to bring in wholeness. We want to embrace illness as a part of life, and we want to look at people who have an illness as following their own path. There's nothing to be, in a way, there is nothing wrong with us at all. So individually, it can be a path of personal and spiritual growth, waking up and growing up. And societally, it can be an opportunity to recognize our vulnerability and welcome it as an aspect of our experience. And it can also be a source for learning. I mean, who better can tell us about don't know mind or patience or endurance or courage than somebody who's been working with a chronic illness for 20 years. They've had to face all of these problems and work through them. And right now we need that kind of knowledge. We need people who know how to endure, to be patient, to be in don't know mind, and to have courage. So I am hoping that some of the experience of people who've had chronic illnesses will come forward into the culture and help us deal with this one. And it's also can show us a lot about impermanence and loss. Living with illness means endless losses. One after another tend to pile up on people with serious chronic illness. And we're seeing that in the society now. We're seeing loss upon loss upon loss showing up. And I also see illness as an opportunity for training in compassion. We can all develop a little bit more of the bodhisattva in us, in inclusion, service, and working for the least of us. If we can develop that in ourselves, compassion, inclusion, service, we can take that out into the world and encourage that kind of thing. And then I think also it offers an opportunity to see the non-duality of ill and well, the yin and yang of this movement between illness, this interpenetration of illness and wellness everywhere. And maybe not to see it as a terrible thing, but to see it as a natural thing and something that's constantly in flow and something we need to work with. So I wanted to spend just a minute thinking about illness as a growth process. That it's a disorienting dilemma. One of the things that has been found to help people grow is disorienting dilemmas. And illness, above almost everything, is a disorienting dilemma. It shakes up your life. If you're a caregiver, it shakes up your life. And if you're a provider, you're seeing it all the time. You're living in the middle of it. So it is a disorienting dilemma, but it can be used as a workshop for growth if people take that on individually as an opportunity rather than simply a curse or a tragedy, to try to see how it can help people grow. And in my experience working with people with chronic illness, I have seen it produce so much more depth, so much more growth in people who have an illness. And again, we can learn from them because of that. And so dismissing it as, stand over there until you get well and come back into life, to me makes no sense at all. That we need to learn from people who are in this particular situation. And then another thing we can do is we can hold illness as a koan, and that's the title of the work that I do, the koan of illness. And I'm not talking about the purity of a Zen koan, because I don't think I can work at that level with it. But if we think of illness as a puzzle that cannot be answered with the rational mind, and just be held close to us and be allowed to reveal things to us over time. The story came to me. I have a friend named Frances Bennett. Some of you may know him, her, and because he's a spiritual teacher. And at one point, she was working as a chaplain and went to visit people in their homes to help them. And there was a person there who was suffering greatly, a terrible form of cancer. And every time Frances showed up, this person would say, "Why me? Why me? Why me? This is a terrible thing." And finally she said to her, "This is your koan." And she, in the story, takes it to heart, really sees that this is her koan. And she completely transforms. She transcended. She became a completely different person. Joyous, aware, and she had a birthday party some weeks later and just radiant. So illness has the possibility to change us. And it is a koan. Why is it that we are in this world and we get sick? I mean, couldn't we all be made to be well? Why do we have to be sick? And why does our culture get sick? It's also a koan. And there's no easy answer to this question. It's just something that as you hold it, and many other questions that come up with illness, such as why me? Or why is there suffering? And all those sorts of questions. They're very deep questions. And we can hold those and we can think about them, or not even think about them, just let them work on us. So I think we have time for one more breakout group. And I think the question this time is, how might I see illness as a path for growth, or how might I see it as a koan? So you might want to share your thoughts on that with each other. Okay, welcome back. So a final thing, we talked about a possibility as a path of personal growth, or a possibility of holding a koan and approaching it in a spiritual way. And I think we can also hold illness just simply as a way to be human. It's just a different way. I mean, some people become parents, some people become workers, some people become artists, and other people explore this territory of illness. And I think we can look at it like that. I have a quote from Alan Watts, and he says, "The purpose of life is to be alive." So there's no special purpose for any one of us, and every one of us is unique. And the attempt that we find in our culture to push everybody into one track and say there's only one right way to be human, only one right way to develop, I think it's just wrong. So I think we can look about illness as just another track to be on, another place to investigate and to bring back treasures from and find things. And I wanted to read a poem by Mary Oliver. Many of you may know her, but can we put it up, Jose, so people can see it? Thank you. She says, this is called Wild Geese. She says, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you about mine." Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of rain are moving across the landscape, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue sky, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. So I think that last line is so important. We all have a place in the family of things, whatever is going on with us. There are not acceptable ways to be human and non-acceptable ways to be human. So we have 15 minutes left or so. So I'd like to just open it up to questions and thoughts. And are you saying something, Jose?
Yeah, so if you please raise your hand, you can go to participants and you see raise hand, and I will open the microphone for whoever has. I still don't see anyone.
I can say something if it's okay.
Okay, go ahead. Ask questions.
Is it possible to just tell my poem?
Well, let's give a chance to, let's discuss this first. And if there's time at the end, I'd like to do that. But you've already had one chance to speak. So I want to make sure that other people get a chance to speak up too. And we don't have to do the hand raising. If people just want to, I think we can all be respectful of each other and just speak if we'd like to.
I can say that we all get energy from each other, energy to grow, to be brave, to go on. The life is for living, and not to look to another ones, doctors, whoever. And it's our strength and our power, and we are just we are healthy as we are alive. and we are young as we have wishes. So it's very, very good to have in mind and to be like a child, but not childish.
Yes, very nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about a disorientating dilemma, and I think my my experience with diagnosis in 1994 is that I had a sort of peak spiritual experience, and that very definitely sent me on a path of looking at it in a completely different way. And I just wonder, you know, you get that sort of disorientating dilemma, and is there any way of supporting people so that it sort of goes off more to sort of drawing them in rather than hopelessness and just giving up, I guess?
Yes, there are things happening. I know that, well, I have courses online. I'm not trying here to promote myself, but that's a way of meeting with other people and being connected. There's a Jan Bonhoeffer who spoke at the Integral Conference. He's working with physicians. He has a heart-centered medicine. And there's another fellow, Gene Dunaway, who has something like Caring Circles.
Jean is here in the call.
Gene, you're here. Okay, maybe you want to mention what you're doing.
Yes, thank you, Lynn. I went through a liver transplant and had 8 operations over a number of years, and also helped a friend of mine who became ill, had operation and died. And I came up with the idea of creating circles, small groups of people of 6 to 8 who got together and talked about and planned for dealing with major illness and then even death and dying, with creating an understanding they would support each other and be available to be for phone calls for help, etc. And then came up with strategies to actually how to organize them so that when one of them became ill, they would know how to, they'd already have a support network to help them get through and work through whatever unfolded in the situation. So that was the basic idea.
Yeah, thanks, Gene. And if you want to put your information in the chat, you can do that. Have a look. I think Christina had her hand up, Jose.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I want to thank you, all of you, for creating this space. It's been very important for me, more than I can say. Really, thank you. My question has been answered by the persons before. I was going to ask exactly how can we put it into action to take this from the individual to the collective?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, that's the central question. How can we get beyond ourselves? The work that I've been doing the last couple of years, we have a small group of very committed people, but it's a small group, and how do we move that out into a larger world? It's a really good question. So I'd invite any of you to send me ideas or, you know, connect or whatever so that we can do that.
Thank you.
And I'm working on a book, so hopefully that will be out, which has many of these ideas in it. And I'm not sure when, but sometime in the next year.
Great.
And I know that Lynn did say that she doesn't want to promote, but I don't think it's about promoting, it's a service. She has created 6-part course over a year that people participate. And at the end of that, there's a community created just by participating in the course. I mean, the effect that Jean, we're talking with Jean also, has also pointed that it's important to have a support group. So by participating in the courses or joining the initiative of the Caring Circles, the idea is to have someone to call, to have, there's all kinds of things that can happen as support.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yes, I would just like to, as a participant in Lynn's courses, I would just like to say that I've had such an amazing time there. I have made wonderful friends. I have been able to express myself authentically, probably for the first time in my life. So it's no small thing. It's a small group at the moment, but I would encourage everybody to, you know, consider joining, you know, if, Lynn, I think you're going to continue offering this. It is like, I can't express what it's like for somebody like myself with an illness that you can't see, right? To have people there who understand what it's like. Like we've maybe all got different issues going on, but there's a real community, the like of which I can't even describe. And the only thing is, and I'm quite happy to promote it, even if Lynn isn't, because I have benefited so greatly, and I would love everybody to share in that, basically. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay, we still have 6 more minutes. If anyone has.
If, who was it who wanted to read her poem? Is it long, Susanna?
Wait, there's
we have two other.
Christina already talked, is that right?
Yeah.
Sally, you can talk now.
Yeah, hi. I'd just like to share a little bit about the understanding that I came to over 4 years of working with pain. And that is that I've shifted my entire meditative practice from how to live well to how to die well. And that has been the most amazing experience for me, because from the moment of impact in a motor vehicle accident, there's been a letting go one after another of literally everything. Gross things like relationships, economy, my finances, a whole lot of physical things, to more and more and more subtle things of letting go, like letting go of expectations, letting go of ambitions, letting go of every single conceivable conditioning I've had about what I would do with my life, because that's not going to happen. So that to me was the beginning of, wow, this is the beginning of dying. I might have 20 to 30 years left, but this is what's happening. And the loss, understanding how to work with loss has been the most healing thing I've ever experienced. Like, that is such a paradox for me, that it took me losing my health to truly understand what health was. And it becomes more and more and more subtle as I lose my physical health. My spiritual health is exponential. And for that, I have unbelievable gratitude. Thank you.
That's so beautiful. Thank you, Sally. Thank you.
Maria, yes,
Hi, Maria.
I just would like to say a few words. I'm inspired very much by Sally, and I think what is quite amazing about meeting people like this group, which reminds me very much of being with Lynn and the group which Lynn started through her course, is that we have an opportunity of, within like literally few minutes, develop a strong understanding and heart connection, just because I can feel in you, with whom I had the chance to connect here, that actually there are no walls between us. Like, it's so difficult in the everyday meetings in the society to find anyone who would be responsive that way, who would feel the same way. And here it's like a different world of people who share that experience. So everyone who was asking question about where to find that support, I think that looking for the group like this, looking for the course, which is kind of mind and heart opening to me. Through the course, I was able to actually heal a lot of traumas related to the system, healthcare system, and at the same time develop a big understanding of the large picture, which is the wholeness, which I guess Lynn meant. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful to be here, participating in this workshop.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Everyone's so beautiful, what you say. I love it.
Well, I guess you have to say some closing words on the 2 minutes.
All right. Well, I'm sorry we missed your poem, but maybe we'll pick it up another time and send it to me, and I'd love to look at it. If you want to write to me, it's lynn@transformationteaching.com. I'm really glad you all came, and I'm glad of the opportunity to put this out, and I appreciate the IEC. I was initially intended to speak there, and then when it changed to the online, I couldn't, and then I was given a spot, and then it was taken away. So they said they would. I said I would do it on my own, and they would offer an announcement about it. So it worked out really well. So I really appreciate them and the conference and all of you for coming. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, so see you all. Take care. Love to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Open all
you.
the microphones.
Bye,
so you
everybody.
can
Bye,
see
everyone.
Thanks
everybody.
for being here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lynn.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Nice people.
Yes.